willing to put into action to help, combat this problem. It's in Stark County, it was in the news recently that in Canton we had the refrigerator truck at the morgue's office because we had so many dead bodies. They couldn't be contained within the morgue. This is a huge issue. It's affecting every single socioeconomic level and, everybody across the board. It's devastating. And the lip service has definitely not been enough for anybody.
So Kasich is term limited. He will be ending his term this coming cycle. So who all is running this year in 2018 for governor? I know there's a lot of people running. Are most of the people who are running Republicans? Are there also a fair number of Democrats running? And whose campaigns are looking really strong?
I guess I'll pop in here and anyone else can join in and add to the list. But right now, the more, I think, prominent Democratic campaigns. On the Republican ticket, it looks like it's going to be solely Mike DeWine and John Husted. But on the Democratic ticket, we've just had a few people step down from their races. Richard Cordray and Betty Sutton have became a pretty prominent ticket and a pretty popular ticket so far, both having a lot of experience in Washington and in Ohio politics. And Joe Schiavone, a kind of rising young star, picked Stephanie Dodd, who's on the state Board of Education, as his running mate. So I would say those are the two most prominent looking ones. Dennis Kucinich just jumped in the race, but I'll let someone else comment and give some of their feedback as well.
Well, I'm sure Lorraine knows that Renacci has recently dropped out of the governor race.
I was going to comment on
Yeah.
Yeah, he's dropped out now. He's looking at, running against Sherrod Brown, our beloved Sherrod Brown. Yeah, and I think that the governor's race for the women in my group has been a little bit disappointing because we were very excited that there were so many women throwing their hat in, and we thought, we're going to get an opportunity to not only vote for a Democrat in Ohio, but for governor, but a female Democrat. And then when Richard Cordray jumped in, it kind of sunk those hopes. And I know Nan Whaley just dropped out, so it really changed the playing field there for women. That's a huge focus in my group, is getting women into leadership and elected into office. So that was a kind of a disappointment. And then in terms of Renacci running against Sherrod Brown, I'm in District 16. He is my representative, and he's pretty much discussed all of us in our group. And as part of our group, we're also involved in indivisible activities, and we've pulled lots of stunts at his office to try to bring some awareness to the issues of ACA and some other things that we're concerned about in our group. And his complete lack of availability or even a willingness to talk to any of us has been really disappointing. So the fact that he wants to run against Sherrod Brown is really disheartening for us. We don't necessarily feel that he has a shot at, a strong shot at winning, but it gives us pause. We would hate to see him take that lead. And then, also I've heard a rumor that J.D. Vance considering a run against Sherrod Brown in the Senate race. I know we're not talking about the Senate race, but that was something that intrigued me recently. I thought, not another one. But the overwhelming feeling amongst activists in this area and people that I'm involved with is that we were really excited about, all the women running for governor. So we will obviously vote for whichever Democrat rises to the top.
I think it'd be really exciting if Richard Cordray won, because Betty Sutton is running with him, and I really like Betty Sutton.
Yeah, we like Betty Sutton too. And actually, we were considering if she was going to consider dropping out of the race, of starting a campaign to get her to run for 16. That didn't work out for us.
Yeah, this is Mark, guys. I feel like early on in the governor's race, we had some pretty strong candidates. We had Nan Whaley, Joe Schiavone, Connie Pillage, and Betty Sutton. And while we've had a few other strong people jump in, like Rich Cordray, we've seen Nan Whaley go away, like you guys have said before me. We've seen Betty Sutton team up with Rich Cordray. But what really concerns me is at the moment we have one person of color running statewide. And that's Rob Richardson, who's running for treasurer. I feel like he's got a pretty good campaign. He's got a great campaign manager, but at the same time, I also feel like he's just a little too inexperienced. I don't think he's too inexperienced, but I think he comes across as inexperienced because he hasn't held elected office. And historically in Ohio, if we can't elect the governor, if we can't elect the Democrat as governor, it's pretty impossible to elect somebody down ballot for a statewide office. So I'm afraid that we won't get people like Rob Richardson or people like Kathleen Clyde or Zach Space elected in Ohio. I mean, Rich Cordray is pretty much the front runner, and I feel like maybe Joe Schiavone will come in second. I'm not. I don't want to I don't want to give a bunch of political predictions here, but I feel like Rich Cordray is pretty much the front runner, and I just really want him to come across a little bit more exciting.
Mm-hmm.
He just needs to plug away a little bit more. His campaign needs to plug away a little bit more. I'm excited to see. I saw a lot of volunteer opportunities on Facebook for him today, so I'm hoping that a lot more of those pick up. And yeah, I was definitely a little disappointed when Betty Sutton dropped out of the race because I was pretty excited for her too.
Can we talk a little bit what campaigning for a position like governor looks like in Ohio? Ohio, I think, is somewhat unique in the number of big cities it has and how much farmland it has in between those big cities, being relatively small geographically but divided into 88 different counties. So, does that present challenges for people who are running for governor or for any other statewide office?
Hey guys, this is Mark. I think it definitely presents a lot of challenges. I mean, like you said, the state's small geographically. I kind of think the state's pretty large, really. I mean, living in Northeast Ohio, like I travel to Columbus pretty often for work and just for, my personal life. Columbus is 2.5 hours for me. Cincinnati is about 5 hours for me. Getting from my house to Toledo is about 2.5 hours. Like the state's pretty spread out. A lot of these different areas have a lot of different events on the same days. So I think just traveling the state as a candidate can definitely be rough. But then also, I like to say like Ohio's the perfect representation of the nation. I think that's why we generally vote in favor of whoever the president's going to be. Because we do have major cities like the three C's, Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. We've got mid-sized places like Youngstown and Akron and Dayton, Toledo, but then you've got smaller areas like Athens, which I guess Athens isn't massively small, but you've got very, very small areas and small communities that, mean a lot. So I think it's very difficult to be a candidate in the state, but I also think that it's not the worst thing in the world as long as you know how to message to the people that you're talking to. I think that's something that the Obama campaign did well here in 08 and 12. I mean, when I was an organizer in 12, we had 4 different kinds of literature in my office because I had urban turf, I had rural turf, and I had suburban turf. So we had multiple different kinds of literature to hand out. And that same thing didn't really happen in 2016. There was no very strong localized messaging across the state, from what I can tell. It's not that it's not difficult, but it's definitely doable for a Democrat to travel the state and win here.
Hey guys, this is Eli. I'll also say yes, it is. It's very difficult to campaign, and I look at it from a millennial standpoint, and the conglomeration of colleges, I think, makes Ohio very interesting. You have some in Northeast Ohio, you have some in Northwest, and the Four Corners, and then you look at Columbus having Ohio. For the candidates to reach the millennial votes and really get in front of the younger people, it's not like they can travel simple 30 minutes and hit a college. They have to travel to, the four corners of the state or in the middle of the state to get a wide base of them. And even in population wise, the main parts of population, Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and a few of the other big cities. But besides that, the state's very rural, and you see it's becoming a more red state, which was always a dominant battleground state. But it's because the older generations are moving into the rural areas, and we're losing a lot of the millennial youth because they're moving out to different parts of the country. So it's a tough state to connect to the youth, but I think it's on the rise, and I think there's a lot of positivity around them.
So let's talk about the Senate race as well. We started to talk a little bit about it. So Josh Mandel recently dropped out of the race. So he was running as a Republican against the Democrat incumbent Sherrod Brown. And so Josh Mandel had said that because of his wife's health, he needed to spend more time with his family. So what does the Senate race look like now? Renacci is talking about, or maybe has already declared, that he's going to run as a Republican. Are there other Republicans who are running or thinking about running?
I'm going to say that, there's been rumors, but I haven't heard anybody confirming that they're running. Like says J.D. Vance, the author of Hillbilly Elegy, is considering a run for Senate. And then I've heard a few other names, but I haven't heard of anybody that's confirmed. I know that Renacci actually did post something on his Facebook page that he was planning on running, and that President Trump had asked him to run personally, specifically. So, other than that, I don't know.
I know that apparently the local GOP and the statewide GOP reached out to former Ohio State Buckeyes coach Jim Tressel to run. Jim Tressel is currently the president of Youngstown State University. He officially has declined running. So I'm pretty excited that he's not going to run. Not gonna lie. But then there's always been another candidate in that race with Mike Gibbons, who's a banker out of Cleveland, and a pretty wealthy banker out of Cleveland. So I mean, I would say we shouldn't really sleep on Mike Gibbons. He already got the Franklin County GOP endorsement, and I don't think that he's somebody to be overlooked. I feel like in Democratic circles we don't know him because he hasn't been elected. He's never ran for office. But outside of that, he's been traveling the state. Like if you look at his Facebook, you look at like his schedule. He's been traveling the state for the past year. I definitely would say he's not to be overlooked. He's been campaigning within the Republican Party for a while now. But I mean, I think either choice between Mike Gibbons, who's extremely inexperienced and very money driven, or Jim Renacci, who's very, very money driven and just an all around terrible politician. I think either way we have to be prepared for beating either one of them. And so I really hope that there's a lot more people thinking about Mike Gibbons, who may possibly win the nomination.
Do we have any sense of whether or not like the national RNC is targeting Sherrod Brown's seat in 2018? Because I know they're targeting a couple of Democratic senators to see if they can knock them out, and I know one of them is mine here in Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin. But I wondered if Sherrod Brown was being specifically, you think, heavily targeted by the RNC.
This is Lorraine. I kind of had that impression. I don't have any specific evidence of that, but certainly the talk is that's happening. And then I have friends outside of the state who are involved in politics in D.C. who have actually told me, look out, they're really gunning for him. So nothing official, but it certainly seems that way. And he would definitely be, I think, senator to take on for the RNC. He's sort of Democratic watchdog in D.C. and I think he'd be, definitely would be an easy target for them, or not easy target, but a target that they would be interested in.
Yeah, and we have a state that Trump won by 8 points just back in 2016. I think it would be stupid for them not to be targeting him. That being said, I feel like Sherrod's a very strong politician and an extremely strong candidate. So I mean, I don't want to say we shouldn't be worried about the race, but I'm less worried about Sherrod at this point than I was worried about Ted Strickland at this point in 2016. Which I mean, they were hitting Ted Strickland before he ever announced that he was running. You couldn't go on YouTube without seeing an ad that was anti-Ted Strickland. And I don't see as much of that with Sherrod Brown, but I'm sure that it's coming.
What are the other races that may be of importance in Ohio in 2018?
Hey guys, it's Eli. OH14, I think, is a winnable race, and that's David Joyce's current seat, the Republican. And there's a really good candidate named Betsy Rader. She's a lawyer. She's been a judge before. She's got a lot of experience just being around campaigns for quite a long time, but she's very energized. I think she's got a positive rapport with the DNC, and I think with a lot of voters around in the area. And her district encompasses Ashtabula County, Lake County, a little bit of Trumbull County, Geauga, and might run into Summit. I'm not quite sure. Someone else might be able to help piggyback on that, but I think it's a very flippable seat. She's doing a great job, and I'm excited to see how that shakes up too.
Yeah, Eli mentioned the one I was going to mention also. I feel like Betsy Rader is a pretty strong candidate. She's also got an opponent in the primary who I think would be a decent candidate too, Larry Diamond. But if I had to guess, Betsy Rader is definitely going to win that primary. She's a very, very strong candidate, a civil rights attorney. Over Summit at Eli. And I think that she stands to really give David Joyce a run for his money in that district, especially. I mean, I live here in Trumbull County, and when I was a field organizer in 12, I had northern Trumbull County as my turf, which is pretty rural. Don't ask me why they put a random black guy from Warren in a rural turf, but they did. So, I still talk to a lot of my volunteers who live up in that area. And 12 was when we redistricted, and Dave Joyce's district took a lot more Trumbull County into it. and a lot of them are pretty excited to like get out there and roll up their sleeves against David Joyce, because I feel like if there's any race in the state of Ohio that can possibly be won, if there's only